We've decided it's best you don't come to the wedding tomorrow. Your energy is too heavy. And frankly, you look like a gardener. You'll ruin Courtney's photos. Stay in the city." I read the text message 3 times. The words didn't hurt. Not anymore. Hurt implies surprise. And nothing my mother did surprised me. I was sitting in the driver's seat of my car. The engine, idling to keep the heater running against the biting aspen blizzard outside. Through the swirling snow, I looked up at the house looming on the peak above me. The glass fortress. $12 million of steel, stone, and triple-paned glass designed to withstand the harshest winters and look beautiful doing it. My family was currently inside. Unlocking the front door, they were laughing, dragging their expensive luggage across the heated floors, popping champagne. They thought they had rented the most exclusive venue in Colorado for my sister's wedding. They thought they were the guests of honor. They didn't know the access code worked only because I set it to my own birthday 3 hours ago. They didn't know that the gardener they just banned was the landlord. Drop a comment and let me know where you're listening from and what time it is for you right now. I'd love to know who's part of our community. I didn't leave. I shifted the car into drive and navigated the winding service road that snaked up the ridge behind the property. I parked at the overlook, a spot I had designed specifically to view the architecture in its entirety. Below me, the house glowed like a diamond dropped into a snowbank. To the world, it was the Glass Fortress, a $12 million architectural marvel featured in Digest and Modern Living. To my family, it was just a lucky rental, a backdrop for Courtney's perfect day. They had no idea that every beam, every pane of triple-paned glass, and every species of plant in the massive central conservatory had been curated by the gardener they had just exiled. I didn't buy this house with family money. I didn't buy it with a lottery ticket. 3 years ago, a tech CEO with more ambition than liquidity hired me to design a living ecosystem for his winter retreat. When his company imploded and his assets were frozen, I wasn't just a contractor. I was the primary creditor. I took the unfinished shell of the house in a lien settlement. I finished it myself, pouring every cent of my savings and every ounce of my skill into making it a sanctuary. It was my masterpiece, and I had never told them. People always ask why. Why hide something this huge from the people who raised you? The answer isn't simple. It's buried in years of conditioning. It's what I call the invisible chain of the survivor. I remember the day the chain locked onto me. I was 12 years old. I had just won the state junior botany championship. I was standing in the kitchen, holding a trophy that was almost as big as I was, waiting for my mother to turn around from the counter. When she finally did, she didn't look at the trophy. She looked at the dirt under my fingernails. "Mallory, go scrub your hands." She sighed, her voice heavy with a specific kind of disappointment. "Courtney has her pageant rehearsal in an hour. We need you to hem her sash. If only you cared as much about your appearance as you do about that mud. Maybe people would actually look at you." That was the lesson, burned into my brain before I even hit puberty. Courtney was the art. I was the frame. Courtney was the event. I was the logistics. My value wasn't intrinsic. It was transactional. I was allowed to exist in the family as long as I was useful, as long as I fixed the problems, lent the money, and stayed out of the photos. If I had told them about the Glass Fortress, they wouldn't have been proud. They would have consumed it. Brenda would have criticized the lighting while moving her friends in for free vacations. Courtney would have turned it into her personal Instagram studio. Jared would have tried to leverage it for a loan. They would have stripped the joy from it just like they stripped the joy from my trophy. So, I learned the power of silence. I built a dual life. To the world. I was Mallory, the renowned landscape architect who commanded six-figure fees. To them, I was just Mallory, the background character who played with dirt. I let them underestimate me because invisibility was the only safety I had. But looking down at the house now, watching the lights flicker on in the master suite, my suite, I realized the chain had finally snapped. They weren't just using me anymore. They were invading me. And for the first time in my life, being invisible gave me the ultimate tactical advantage. They didn't know they were at war. And they certainly didn't know the enemy held the keys. I tapped the screen of my tablet, and the interior of the glass fortress flooded the display in 4K resolution. I had installed the cameras myself. Hidden behind the sleek, recessed lighting and tucked into the canopy of the indoor trees. They were meant to monitor humidity levels and plant health. But today, they were monitoring an infestation. The front door swung open. My mother, Brenda, stepped into the foyer first. She didn't wipe her boots. She stomped a clod of dirty, gray slush directly onto the heated Italian slate floors I had imported from a quarry in Tuscany. She dropped her fur coat on the entry bench, a piece of custom joinery made from reclaimed ash, and looked around with a sneer that I knew better than my own reflection. "It's so cold," she announced, her voice crisp over the audio feed. "All this glass. It feels like an aquarium. I told Jared we should have booked the log cabin at the Ritz. This place has no soul." I watched, my grip tightening on the steering wheel. No soul. She was standing inside a living, breathing architectural marvel that breathed with the rhythm of the mountain. And she dismissed it because it didn't have doilies. Courtney swept in next, shaking snow from her hair like a wet golden retriever. She was followed by Jared, who was already on his phone, probably checking his crypto portfolio. They walked right past the mudroom I had designed specifically to contain the winter mess and marched straight into the great room. "Okay, the view is decent," Courtney admitted, looking out at the panoramic sweep of the Rockies. "But the layout is all wrong for the rehearsal dinner. Why is there so much nature?" She was pointing at the conservatory. It was the heart of the house. A 2-story glass atrium filled with rare ferns, moss walls, and the orchids. It was climate-controlled, humid, and smelled of rich, fertile earth, the smell of life. "It smells like dirt in here," Courtney complained, wrinkling her nose. "It smells like a greenhouse." Jared, "Baby, did you check the contract? Can we close this off? It ruins my winter wonderland aesthetic." I wanted ice sculptures, not a jungle. Jared didn't answer immediately. He was too busy lifting the corner of the rug to check the label. "Court, look at this. This sofa is a B&B Italia. It's like 20 grand. And that lamp, that's a vintage Arco. This guy must be loaded. He has money, but no taste," Brenda corrected. Walking over to the glass wall of the conservatory, she tapped on the pane with her diamond ring. Clink, clink. "Who puts a swamp in the middle of a ski lodge? It's unhygienic. We need to cover this up. Maybe we can drape some fabric over the glass walls, or just turn the lights off in there so nobody has to look at it." I felt a cold burn in my chest. They weren't just criticizing a rental property. They were dissecting my soul. Every choice in that house, from the humidity sensors to the specific angle of the solar panels, was a reflection of my expertise. And they were treating it like a mistake that needed to be corrected. "We can move the furniture," Courtney decided, tossing her gloves onto the $20,000 sofa. "Push all this ugly modern stuff against the walls." We need space for the caterers to set up the carving station. And that big table, the one with the live edge, get rid of it. It looks unfinished. I'll handle it, Jared said, puffing out his chest. We rented the place. We can do what we want. They began to drag the furniture. I watched the metal legs of a chair scrape across the slate floor. A sound that didn't transfer through the audio but echoed in my mind like a scream. They were rearranging my sanctuary to fit their ego. They treated the space with the casual arrogance of people who believe their money buys them the right to rewrite reality. But they hadn't bought anything. They hadn't rented anything. They were just intruders, playing house in a fortress they didn't understand, surrounded by invisible walls that were about to close in. Outside, the whiteout conditions intensified. The wind howled against the glass walls of the fortress. A primal scream that made the silence inside feel even more artificial. Inside, the redecorating had hit a snag. It's not enough space, Courtney whined, pacing the slate floor in her heels. If we put the carving station here and the bar there, where does the DJ go? The acoustics in this room are terrible with all this stuff. She gestured vaguely at the conservatory. The glass walls I had meticulously engineered to maintain a precise microclimate were now, apparently, an obstacle to her vision. What if we just open it up? Brenda suggested. She walked over to the climate control panel. I held my breath. It was password protected. She mashed a few buttons. And when nothing happened, she huffed. Useless technology. Jared. Can't you just pry the doors open? We can use that space for the dance floor. It's got that rustic vibe. Rustic, Courtney made a face. It's full of dead sticks. Mom, look at those brown things. They're ugly. She was pointing at the Cypripedium, the snowy slipper orchids. To an untrained eye, in their dormant winter state, they might look like dry stalks. To a botanist, or anyone with a soul, they were one of the rarest living things on the planet. I had spent 5 years cultivating them from seedlings, obtaining federal permits, and creating a sanctuary for a species that was practically extinct in the wild. They're just weeds, Jared said, eager to please. Whoever lived here probably forgot to water them. Tell you what, let's clear them out. We can use the planters for ice buckets. Clear them out. Courtney's eyes lit up. Yes, get rid of the ugly dead stuff. It'll look so much cleaner. I watched, paralyzed by a cold, creeping horror. As my family marched into the conservatory, Jared forced the sliding glass door open. The humidity rushed out, meeting the dry, conditioned air of the lodge. They didn't stop. They walked right up to the raised beds. These pull right out, Brenda said cheerfully. She grabbed a handful of the dormant orchid stems. With a grunt of effort, she yanked. The sound of roots tearing was soft, almost inaudible over the audio feed. But it hit me like a physical blow. She held up the root ball. Dirt falling onto the pristine floor. See, just dead trash. Toss it in the fireplace, Courtney commanded, pointing to the massive stone hearth in the great room. We need to get a fire going anyway. It's freezing in here. I watched them form a bucket brigade of destruction. Jared uprooted the plants. Brenda carried them. Courtney directed traffic. They were laughing. They were joking about how much better the room looked without the clutter. This wasn't just vandalism. It was a psychological autopsy of my family. I used to wonder if they were evil. Watching them now, I realized it was something far more insidious. It was the trap of normalizing cruelty. They didn't see themselves as villains destroying a sanctuary. They saw themselves as heroes improving a rental. They genuinely believed that anything they didn't understand my career, my silence, my rare plants had no value. To them, the world was a mirror. If it didn't reflect their own vanity back at them, it was broken, and it was their right to fix it. Burn it all, Brenda said, tossing a bundle of $20,000 specimens into the hearth. Jared struck a match. The dry stalks ignited instantly, flames racing up the chimney and erasing 5 years of work and an irreplaceable piece of natural history. They laughed, warming their hands over what they didn't understand. I didn't scream. I didn't react. Something cleanly severed inside me. They were no longer my family. They were criminals. I didn't call the local sheriff. I knew it would be dismissed as a civil dispute. Instead, I dialed a number marked emergency. Agent Miller. You. Is Fish and Wildlife. I identified myself as the licensed custodian of a federally registered botanical sanctuary and reported that unauthorized individuals were actively destroying Class A endangered plants. I sent him the live footage of my mother burning the specimens. That's a felony, he said. Federal jurisdiction. A team will arrive in 20 minutes. I'll meet them, and I want full charges. Then I made the second call to the Winslows, the billionaire parents of my sister's fiancé. I warned them not to arrive as guests, but as witnesses. 5 minutes later, they came with me through the storm. When we entered the house, the party froze. My mother and sister screamed at me to leave until the Winslows stepped into the chandelier light. The room went silent. They claimed they were redecorating, that the plants were clutter. I pulled a charred stem from the fire and named it a snowy slipper orchid, one of fewer than 500 left in the wild destroyed, inside a federally protected sanctuary I was licensed to operate. Before they could argue, Agent Miller and 2 federal officers arrived. Destruction of protected species, he said. $50,000 per specimen. Mandatory federal prison time. My mother begged the Winslows to intervene. Instead, I handed Mrs. Winslow the deed. They didn't rent this house, I said. I own it. I built it, and they committed a federal crime inside it. The truth collapsed everything. My mother and sister were led out in handcuffs. The Winslows canceled the wedding on the spot and froze their son's trust fund. He fled into the storm, alone. Afterward, I stood in the ruined conservatory, soil scattered, planters empty, sensors blinking red. I should have been broken. Instead, I felt calm. You can't save people who choose to burn everything down. You can only step out of the fire. I transferred the restitution funds into the sanctuary account. I would rebuild, expand, and make something they could never touch again. I let go of my bloodline and chose my own roots. I was the sower, and this was my justice.